My name's Oliver Money Curl. I'm head of European advocacy at the International Press Institute. So this webinar is organised partly as an opportunity for us to present the report of the mission conducted by the Media Freedom Rapid Response to Poland in September. We went there in order to assess the state of media freedom in the country and the changes that had taken place since the change of government at the end of 2023. Obviously, the main focus for our discussion was probably the state of public media. Obviously, there have been very disputed or controversial changes that had taken place at the start of the new government, at the start of 2024. And we wanted to see what the consequences were of that and how the public media were conducting itself today, and moreover, what the government's plans were for securing its future independence from government. We also wanted to look at the plans for bringing Polish regulation into line with the new European Media Freedom Act, which had come into force in May of last year. And in particular, we'll be looking at questions of, I think, well, the political independence of media regulators, looking at the questions of media ownership transparency and media pluralism, and also looking at issues of how to prevent the abuse of state advertising. And thirdly, we were looking at probably one of the most significant tools that were used in the past 10 years to pressure independent media, and that was the use of vexatious lawsuits, otherwise known as slaps, against the media and against independent journalists. So those are the three main issues. Just quickly, I'd like to read out some of the key findings that our report came up with. The first one was that we felt that the media freedom situation in Poland had or has improved substantially, with much greater independence of the public media, a drop in vexatious lawsuits, improved levels of media pluralism, and an end to abuse of state funds to influence media. While the public media has shed its role as a propaganda tool for the government, it nevertheless remains neither fully objective nor reliably depoliticised. Therefore, the government still has much to do to guarantee the future political and financial independence of public media. The government has introduced plans or proposed plans to restrict local governments or local municipalities from owning local media. This is also a controversial issue, which I hope that we can touch upon later today. But the idea certainly would be to try to create a greater level of political independence for local media coverage as well. And finally, the threat of slap cases has significantly diminished since the Ministry of Justice announced that it's closing its legal cases and it's taking out the legal cases that had previously been taken out by the private media. So, to help us explore these issues, I'm delighted to be able to welcome a fabulous lineup of guests and leading figures from Poland's media landscape. We have Alexander. Now, I apologise if I mispronounce this. We have Alexander Sobczak, Deputy Editor-in-Chief of Gazeta Wyborcza. We have Tadeusz Kowalski, who's a member of Poland's National Broadcasting Council, CRIT, among many other things. And we have Joanna Seminska, who's Article 19's Europe and Central Asia Senior Programme Officer and one of the persons who leads our work on anti-SLAPP, both in Poland and across Europe. So I'd like first of all to turn to you, Alexander. You're deputy editor of one of the leading, if not the leading, private print media in the country. Your newspaper was targeted both by slaps and by a cut in state advertising and many other sort of forms of pressures. How has things changed for you? How has it changed for journalists in your newsroom? What is the outlook, and what are the new challenges, the new problems that you anticipate coming up facing journalists today?
Thanks for having me, and I would like to thank you also for the report, because sometimes being here we lose this general perspective, and this report is very valuable for us, for me at least. And just quickly commenting on what you just said, you said that the number of slabs diminished. Yeah, and unfortunately, we are still having slabs after the previous government, and we are having new slabs. So the truth is that many of them are gone. The process was very long because it had to be long. It's not that easy just to, make it disappear. So some institutions were eager to work to withdraw those lawsuits, but some are still want to keep them and still want to meet in courts, although the government changed. So we just need some new regulations about that. I'm happy that the Minister of Justice is at least working on it, although we would like it to happen much more quickly. I would also want to comment on the state of the public state media, because it's a big part in your report. And my comment is just from the audience as a journalist. Yeah, I'm not an expert on it, but what I would like to say is that they changed immensely. In my opinion, they are just definitely more objective at the moment than they used to be. And I would even say that, in my opinion, they are at the moment the most objective media in Poland. But it's not always for their benefit, because what happened is that they lost a large part of the audience, in my opinion, because this was the audience that was used to aggressive political attacks. And the temperature of the programs was extremely high before. So there was a lot of hatred, disinformation. And at the moment, they are just providing news and opinion that is balanced, that is showing different kinds of perspective. And apparently, for many viewers, this is boring. And this is a kind of showing a broader mechanism that we are dealing in media generally, not only in public media, that disinformation and hate is simply more interesting sometimes for many readers, for many television viewers, than reliable information. Reliable information is not attracting as much attention. So this is something that we, from the positive thing, I can also see this general frustration of journalists that are doing a better job and having a smaller audience. So this is my comment about public media. Also, there is one topic in your report that is mentioned just slightly, but it's incredibly important for me at the moment, and by which I mean big technological companies, so the new gatekeepers, who for years we used to treat as neutral politically. But at the moment, we can be just totally sure that they are not neutral at all. They are involved in politics, and they are creating a lot of disruption in media, and this is really wrong sometimes. By this, I mean that I am quite sure that our reach of Wyborcza is going to further shrink due to new algorithms of Meta and Google. And I believe it because I observe, I will give you one practical example. Whenever we publish any kind of critical article about Facebook or Instagram or X or Google, we have no external traffic. Just no external traffic. We only reach our subscribers. They are very interested in it. They are very involved, but these are only our subscribers who come to our homepage, to our app, or read it in paper. And they are just cutting the traffic. So if they can do it on this topic, they can do like whatever. And I just observe it with real disbelief, because they are at the same time creating, like spending a lot of money on PR and lobbying, proving that they are this, you know, free speech advocate, and this is simply not true, and they are just taking traffic to the topics they want to support. At the time it is just far right, and often in Polish case Russian disinformation, because as I observe, Russian secret service can use the business model of big technological companies very well to provide engagement, to provide traffic, and that's why they are simply much more visible on social platforms than news media, than reliable information or opinion. So this is a second thing, and last thing I would like to comment on at the moment is state advertisements. Well, first of all, they didn't come back to Wyborcza, and I'm not complaining, because I truly believe that no media should be ever paid for not criticizing with ads. So I really expect that we should have a transparent system and just to never again have what we used to see during previous government, that some supporting media were just so beneficial, although it was not worth the money, that they didn't provide any traffic, for example. But at the same time, what I am complaining about is the incompetence, I would say, of politicians who are supposedly preparing some new law. I said supposedly because they just said they would do it, but nothing is really happening. So this is my frustration. But on the other hand, I'm just waiting for it to work properly and be just, you know, done for longer but properly. And that's basically it for now.
Well, you've covered a lot of ground there, Alexandra. Thanks very much for that. I mean, obviously, perhaps most obviously, you've taken on one of the biggest issues that I think we've all been struggling with ever since the November election of Donald Trump and the coalition with big tech in Washington, and what the implications may or may not be for us. And certainly, I think we were mistaken in trying to give the benefit of the doubt to platforms, to assume that they were neutral in terms of content. We had a small little part in our report that talks about the negotiations that have to take place over the copyright law and whether or not the platforms will be prepared to do that. So maybe later on you may be able to reflect on the process there, because that is absolutely essential for maintaining the future viability of your work. I would like to turn to Tadeusz. Perhaps, Alexandra said that the public media is much more objective today. It's a bit dull. It's lost a lot of its viewers, which I think is a massive challenge for the public media if it loses its viewers. But is it as neutral and as objective as she says? I've been to quite a few meetings where a lot of journalists have said it's not. They acknowledge that the hate speech is gone. They've acknowledged that the propaganda is no longer there, but that there is still nevertheless an inbuilt bias. And I think your work at CRIT, you monitor the political coverage in public broadcast. And I think your report, and we've cited this in our report, has shown that certainly during the first and I think the third quarter of 2024, only about 13 or 14% of politicians interviewed on public TV news were from opposition parties. Is that still the case? We know that there was a political boycott at the beginning of last year. Is that still the case? Does that indicate that there is a bias? Well, how would you comment on that?
Well, just quite a few days ago, I published the results of the fourth quarter of the 2024. And the situation hasn't been changed if we talk about the percentage of the time for the government and supporting forces and the opposition. The proportion is like 82 to 18 or maybe 84 to 16, it depends. But if you look more carefully into those data, what you have noticed that first of all, this coalition is really a coalition. It consists of several political parties, because it was not like in the time of when the law and justice was in force, that in practice, if you talk about the government, you talk about law and justice. At the moment, it's not like this, because the citizens platform is only one of the fours. Of course, it has the biggest support in the opinion, but still, there is a Polish 2050, there is a peasant party, there are Greens, and there are other forces which support. And if you collect all those times and add to this the presentation for the Prime Minister and the Marshal of the Sejm and Senate, that gives the really great figure that the coalition has really dominance. But if you look into the, let me say strictly, comparing the time which is devoted for the party, political party itself, not just like a coalition, but like a political party, you see that the time for the citizens platform and law and justice is almost the same. So they have the same amount of time devoted to the presentation their views. This is about the Polish television. Almost the same we observe in the big radio, it's a national radio, but much more differentiated situation is in the local radios. We have 17 local public radios. And in those radios, if we compare, for example, Law and Justice and Citizen Platform, we see that there are some places where even Law and Justice has more time than Citizens Platform. So it means that maybe in 5 regional radio stations, is much more time for the Law and Justice than for the Citizens Platform. So situation, if you look more carefully into data, is much more complicated, and that reflects to some extent really a character of the at the moment governing forces, because it's a much more pluralistic, and of course each of those parts, each of those parties wants to present their views. And it is evident for the public that in many cases they present different opinion in the same matter. So it's not like in the time of the Law and Justice, everyone has the same opinion about everything. At the moment, is very much pluralistic. That, for example, if we discuss about abortion, and the problem with this is completely different. The view of Citizen Platform, different Polish 2050, different Peasant Party, and other. So that coalition really itself is very pluralistic. So of course it makes them life much more harder than it was previously, because they had to try to find a majority for any final decision. In this respect, it's like this. So which moment we are at the time? When we met in September here in Warsaw, I tell you that they started the process of the consultation for the introducing or implementing European Media Freedom Act. Those consultations were finished, and in the end of October, the government published results of the consultation, presenting all the voices and reflects if they accept this view or not. At the moment, according to my knowledge, they are in the final stage. The works on the new act, which goes to the government regulatory center. We say government law, RCL, I don't know how to say, legislative office. And in the coming weeks, I guess that it will be included into the plan of government legislation, and then goes into the consultation among all the parts of the government, to the different departments of the government and different ministries. And after then, I guess that maybe in March or maybe in April, will be the final stage works in the parliament, which gives the chance for the non-governmental forces, for the general public or the experts, just to consult the results. It is expected that the new law will be prepared in the mid of the year, this year, but because of the election we have in May, it is expected that the result will be no earlier than in August, due to the fact that we expect for the new president, whoever it will be. That means that the new legislation fully will be introduced since the beginning of 2026. And the result of the consultation and the reflect on the opinion presented by the state regulatory shows the direction in which this new legislation goes. And I think that it's a quite, maybe to some extent, very conservative implementation. Nevertheless, it's a real step toward a better system. So that's my first intervention. And I want just for a second relate to Alexandra, because she told about this practice of big tech algorithms. I think I have my personal experience, because lately, maybe 2 weeks ago or maybe short, I make an interview on Gazeta Wyborcza. It was an interview about the television Republika, and I inform about this. But I inform on my social media, and I have quite a good response from the people in my, of course, in my being my friends. Yes, the reason is that lots of people didn't know that they should give the link to the article, not in the main information, but in the first comment. If you go into the first comment, algorithms don't understand, and because the comment is free, if you give it as a main information, it can be blocked by the algorithm, of course, if they treat wrong anyone. Lots of people didn't know about this, and that's why the reach is very small. It's just a technical matter. Nevertheless, people should know that the better way to inform about something is to give something in the comment, not in the main in the title. So maybe at the moment is what I want to say.
Well, thanks for that, Tadeusz, for that very useful tip. Maybe we will try and organise a workshop with you in a few weeks on how to maximise our algorithmic reach. That would be very helpful. I'd also like to ask you about the view from CRIT. Obviously, the question of the politicisation of CRIT is central to the reforms. How can you ensure that a media regulator can be both politically accountable, but also politically independent? We know that there are controversies over the chair of CRIT and how he has been using CRIT over recent months. So we know that is a problem, but we also know that under MFRR, or under the new reforms, CRIT will probably have an expansion of its role and of its powers to include monitoring of media ownership, to include probably assessing media pluralism, possibly also to being responsible for monitoring the implementation of any safeguards about state advertising. So these are sort of quite significant additions to the role, which means that it's as well as directly appointing members of supervisory bodies of the public media. So you've got an expansion of its role, but it's also politically very compromised. So I wonder if you could perhaps comment on that and how the government will ensure that it can, the measures taken to ensure its future more balanced political representation on CRIT, with a view to its new roles that it will also be adopting, and what we need to be cautious about.
Well, frankly speaking, following to our last meeting in September, there is not so many changes due to the fact that there's a continuation of the policy which is dominated by the politicians from the Law and Justice or connected to them. However, the chairman at the moment is under the supervision of the Commission of Constitutional Responsibility, and this commission is working so actively. And at the moment, after the first investigation before this commission, I spent there 2.5 hours just being asked about several questions. So I guess that the commission is going to the conclusion maybe in March or April, and propose to the parliament the decision about the chairman. So that's if you say about something what has to be changed. But if you talk about the role of the National Broadcasting Council, I only can say about what was during the discussion, what was appears during the discussion of the implementation of MFA. I don't know if it will be included into the proposed regulation. And so we have, first of all, it is proposed the paragraph which say that the National Broadcasting Council may not receive any instruction from any external entity. It is one of the elements of the guarantee that government cannot say what the Broadcasting Council had to do. Secondly, it is expected that the number of the members of the National Broadcasting Commission Council will be extended to 9 members. 4 of them will be nominated by Sejm, 2 by Senate, and 3 by the President. And generally, the term of office will be 6 years, but it is proposed rotation of the composition every 2 years. However, during the discussion, I tried to explain that 2 years is a little bit too short, because in my opinion, 3 years it is much better due to my experience resulting from the practice. Yes, I see how it works when people come to this office with the very complicated legislation, and after 2 years they started to be really competent to some extent, of course, and that's. Well, there is. It was discussed introduction of, let me say, more strict requirements for the members related to the education, the professional experience, or the independence and non-political role. Hearings. It is expected that there will be open hearings of the candidates, with the obligation to answer of all the questions, also from the representative of the civil society. That was a very strong postulate during the works. And when the decision will be taken by Sejm or Senate, the resolution must include the justification for such or not another choice, why this person was appointed, not the other person, that should be publicly explained. Very important is also a certain postulate which was formulated by me during the consultation, that all the administrative decision of the chairman must be preceded by the resolution of the entire council. At this time, there is a lot of decisions which are taken personally by the chairman, and there is no any discussion about the penalties, about different things we have. They are only taken by the chairman, and sometimes he didn't inform us about his decision, and we know about them from the media, which is absolutely incredible. It is also considered that the meetings of the council will be broadcast in the internet. It is I can tell that such legislation, for example, is obligatory in Ukraine, that all the meetings of the council must be accessible via internet. That of course gives easier access to the different resolutions and decisions taken by the council. Of course, it is expected that the council will be competent to support market entities in the creation code of ethics. We think that we don't know to organize as a council. We shouldn't organize, but should support market entities to create the council of the media ethics. And this council should define the principles of reliability, honesty, and impartiality of journalists, as well as models and workshop standards. The council, of course, in the Polish law, there is a distinction between audiovisual media services and the press. The press relates mainly to the print press, traditional to the print press, even if they have an internet edition, doesn't matter. And the council will have no any new most possibilities to regulate the press market. Still, it will be unregulated to some extent, but the council will assess to the will assess to the degree when estimate the degree of the concentration of media market, the publisher should provide data, and that will be the only privilege which will have maybe in the future the Broadcasting Council, and the same will be also regulation concerning public spending on state advertising. But in this respect, we expect that should be cooperating with the special office for the public tender, because we are not competent in assessing if the procedures were properly done. Finally, we will not have any rights to execute press law. Press law is the other act, which is very important for the Polish media, but is not at the competence of the Broadcasting Council. However, in the last year, the chairman tried to make different penalties just relating to the press law. And I always protest against such a practice, because from the broadcasting out, there is no any privilege to use this press law in the decision. So we see how it will work in the future, but as I understand, there is a real will to change the situation and make the council much more transparent and much more pluralistic.
Okay, thanks very much for that summary. It seems that there are a whole series of small measures, each of which can contribute to improving the performance, the effectiveness, and the independence of the decision-making process, which is all really valuable. On their own, they do not solve the problem, but the sum of them can certainly help. I was particularly interested by what you're saying about how the power of the chairman to take decisions without involving the board. One of the things that we've recently protested about in Slovakia is the governments want to reform their media council, which has been quite an independent media council, and the reform they propose is to remove the power of the board and to put all of the power, concentrate all of the power into the hands of the chair, and the board itself would only have a role for receiving complaints or appeals against decisions. And interestingly, they say that this is a reform that is required of them under the European Media Freedom Act. It's going completely against the principles of the European Media Freedom Act, but the government is using the transposition process as an excuse for making these reforms, which obviously is a very, very backward step. I mean, I think it's very interesting you're talking about the code of ethics and supporting the self-regulatory process in Poland. One of the things we touched upon in the mission was the conditions of journalists in the newsrooms and some of the sort of real problematic issues there are to do with ethics and so on and so forth. And it's really incumbent upon the publishers, the owners of the private media as well, to also improve their own codes and their own standards. And certainly a self-regulatory body would be an important step towards that. Look, I'd like to now turn to Joanna, who's been waiting patiently. If you could, Joanna, I mean, look, you're here, you're the expert on all legal matters. we've worked very hard on vexatious lawsuits and the anti-SLAPP directive from the European Commission. There's also the Council of Europe's recommendations, and then there's the commitments or the plans that that Adam Bodnar, as Minister of Justice, has made to reform the situation in Poland. Have the actions matched the promises that have been made by the government? What still needs to be done, and what other legal problems do you think that need to be addressed in Poland?
Thank you, Oliver. So there is an update since our mission to Poland in September, because quite recently the Codification Commission on Civil Law has published their proposal on how to implement the anti-SLAPP directive, the EU anti-SLAPP directive, of course, which and we are happy about it. I'm talking now on behalf of the Polish working group dealing with SLAPPs. Article 19 is part of this working group. We are happy that the proposal goes already beyond the scope of the directive. So it's not only about the cross-border SLAPP cases, but also all the other local at the national level that has always been the biggest problem in Poland. So this is certainly a good development, and the fact that this work on the anti-SLAPP reform, let's call it like this, has taken place. So indeed, last year we heard several times from the Ministry of Justice that the works were ongoing, and now we have a first proposal. However, obviously, we can find some shortcomings of this proposal. We are actually currently analyzing it, and we will also publish our analysis and our answer to that. But of course, now there will be time for discussion for all the process with the involvement of interested parties with civil society. So it's normal that we might have some additional ideas or concerns. I think the biggest now issue for us is how to make sure that this goes beyond the civil procedure, because Poland also has criminal defamation that has never been repealed, although I think this advocacy around repealing criminal defamation has been ongoing for more than 20 years in Poland. We believe that we won't be, like, civil society, activists, journalists, media won't be fully protected from SLAPPs if this criminal provision stays as it is now. So our main call is to decriminalize defamation by strengthening the civil procedure, so by making it more possible to use the civil defamation procedures for those who need it, but to make sure that if we adopt civil code measures, anti-SLAPP measures, we cannot at the same time neglect the criminal code, because then that would mean simply that the slappers would switch and use more of the criminal provision, which has been misused a lot in any case. So that is now our call, and we will be, of course, continuing advocating for this parallel work on the civil and criminal provisions and safeguards, anti-SLAPP safeguards. I would also want to comment maybe on what has been said before about the drop in SLAPP cases. Yes, if we talk about the systemic misuse of defamation lawsuits under the Law and Justice rule, yes, if we are talking about the misuse by the state-owned companies, by ministries, etc. But if we look even at a local level, I think this is something we often forget about, because we usually hear about big SLAPP cases at a national level against some big media outlets or well-known journalists or activists, but the situation at a local level in Poland remains very difficult, and SLAPPs are being still misused, and that's why, and not only by business, by private sector, but also by local politicians against critical voices. So so this is still something that we believe that needs to be addressed as soon as possible, because the problem remains the same, even if it's at different levels from different actors. But as long as we still have criminal defamation in Poland, and as long as we don't adopt anti-SLAPP, implement the directive in the civil law, then not much will change in general.
Okay, thanks for that. And just to confirm, so in the anti-SLAPP directive, that's only an obligation on member states to introduce reforms or anti-SLAPP measures for cross-border cases. But in Poland, the commitment is to also apply it to domestic cases.
Yes, local domestic cases. That's why this is the first thing we are very happy about, because that otherwise that wouldn't have made any sense in this context. Yes, so there is this declaration that's in this draft published, the proposal published by the Codification Commission on Civil Law, to address also those Polish local cases.
Okay, thank you very much. Listen, we've only got a few minutes left. I wanted to ask a question about the future of TVN. We know that Disney are probably looking to sell it. We also know that there was a discussion at the end of last year about how to protect or to prevent TVN getting into the hands of potentially hostile media groups or a hostile government or country, and giving it some kind of sort of strategic status that would give it some sort of protection. I don't know where that debate has gone. I don't know the arguments on either side of it, because I can see how it could be potentially quite problematic if rules are put in wrong. I wonder if one of you, either Tadeusz or Alexandra, would like to comment on that. Was it only going to apply to TVN, or might it also have applied to other media, or is this something that is now past and it's been forgotten?
It would apply to TVN and to another television in Poland. It's not a broader thing, because you just have to list a company, and this is what our Prime Minister did. And in my opinion, this would be more problematic if, for example, Russians from some Hungarian oligarchs would buy our big television, than, you know, putting this television on a list of somehow, you know, fragile assets.
So does this mean it would be that there would be some kind of intervention should Russian-backed money be used to purchase it? Or you mentioned Hungarian oligarchs, of course, within the European Union, so legislatively that'd be much harder and much more problematic, I would think. So what exactly would this mean, being put on a
so if the company is on this list of the strategic companies for the generally the state, the government has to take a look first, so they can like not agree for the purchase.
Okay.
Like they cannot agree, for example, to sell some other companies that were on the list before.
Okay. All right. Did you want to comment on that?
Well, the problem is really very much complicated, because in practice, government shouldn't have any right to decide about this. And even if the government agrees to give the agreement or to give the permission to sell some assets of the TVN to other company, it doesn't mean that automatically the Broadcasting Council will give the license. We are not obliged, because decision about the license and concession belongs to the National Broadcasting Council. And we have a special regulation concerning this in Broadcasting Act. Is Article 25 and 23, which explains when we can refuse to change the owner of the concession station. So it means that from one point of view, it was okay, because to some extent the very hot atmosphere around the TVN just started to be more steady, and there was the low pressure and lower interest in this. But from the other point, we have in mind that the government never should decide about who can get the license and who cannot. It's a constitutional role of the Broadcasting Council. I know that we are in a situation that there is a certain, let me say, bad relation between the government and the coalition and the National Broadcasting Council, for many reasons, we know. But from the other point, if you look into the longer perspective, it cannot be okay if the government decides about the concession, because this should belong to the independent constitutional body. And that's the problem. For example, I give you the last days, it was published a proposal of the legislation concerning implementation of the DSA. And in this proposal, it was appeared that the chairman of the Office for the Telecommunication, we decide about removing certain content from internet. The Office for the Telecommunication has no any competence in this matter. And the reason is why? Because they don't like Broadcasting Council, which is a relevant body. And of course, at the moment, there is less discussion about this, but still the problem exists. So we see that the real changes in the regulatory structure in Poland is absolutely essential to introduce any further solution for even those changes in the ownership and the structure of the ownership of media in Poland. So this is before us. I want to only add that this putting on the list of the strategic investments, which is only temporary. At least it can be 1.5 years, no longer, because the Act very precisely informed that this is not the constant solution. It's just only for a limited period of time. Of course, we should be afraid about the influence of the capital, which can be used for any manipulation and so on. But I have also my personal opinion that if you are buying a television station, you are not buying just assets. You are just buying a certain type of the audience. And I'm not sure if the audience will be able to accept if, for example, the content offer will radically change. Maybe just those viewers simply don't use it. It's a very risky business, to my opinion, but it's of course my personal opinion. So we see, because at the moment this process is of course not very transparent. We only have some some new information about who potentially could be interested in buying TVN. In this respect, just lately it was informed that maybe Berlusconi is interested in buying this station, but at the moment nothing is clear. So it's just a speculation, maybe.
Okay, well, look, thanks very much for that clarification, Ted. Obviously, it's going to be a very complex issue. Listen, I'm afraid we're running out of time, so I just sort of like to, first of all, to thank all three of you for joining us and to thank the audience for joining us. We've only been able to sort of touch on some really complex and difficult issues. Obviously, we look to Poland as a sort of beacon of hope, or a country that hopefully will be able to give us some kind of inspiration in terms of how political changes can lead to quite dramatic changes for the media situation. And there is an opportunity here, we think, for the government and for media stakeholders. Whether or not that opportunity is grasped is to be seen. But we will certainly be continuing to work with our colleagues and our friends in Poland as much as we can, and we're looking forward to see the plans that eventually will be published in the spring. So thanks once again for joining